below modern nations, A through Z, before the foundation of modern nations, came the foundation of semi-ancient nations. And semi-ancient nations were tricked, hurt, persuaded, forced to defend themselves. Not just physical ways, not just identity ways, but uses of that ways themselves used remotely. Semi, and semi-nature of the semi-ancients, part of it, people still couldn't fathom how the entire humanity could forget how to cause positive value nature progression to acts in natures, actually using science, actually how to keep contained. And liberated from criminal foreign influences, which is a phrase needed by countries A through Z as victims, needed to ground that phrase, needed to counter predicate acts, needing to counter the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts and natures. Acts like predicate acts, natures like criminal insidiousness natures, wrongdoers, and like wrongdoing itself. I am not a lawyer, I'm not a police foreman, I'm not a criminal. We have recorded evidences how they, by the same people that will simultaneously deny it, they have self-value roles with the bar itself, what is described as the bar, by lawyers, by judges, by politicians. Because we have a certain type of victim predator that every modern nation is, because of how all locations, areas, and states were in collusion with uses of identity where it is part of syntax nature, where uses of identity ground locations, sequence relationships. See, one of the ways they kept this, they keep recording things where they're having little kids, each age of fact keeping nature is doing this sickly distinctly because there's how they are sickly distinctly victims, and how that don't know how to respond because those remote uses, not just of everyone's styles of lying and pretending others simultaneously, pretending not to realize. So, how in other words, how the branches of each country, including our own, originally criminally foreign influenced, left by our founders to demonstrate how they didn't have free speech, how they had free speech forced, or they would have been discerned by a nervous system, like what they set up with all those crazy laws. Slavery. Torture is additional to slavery. And that was sustained too. Positive and negative treatments. So that's why I refer to this as identity theft / fraud. Because people bring in the money. But the systems itself are involved. So because our fact keeping nature is involved. Not by accident. They painted the arrays of the differences between sciences. Even the differences of homeschooled kids, each age of fact keeping nature, correlation nature, has a legitimate, what they call misinformation or disinformation, whatever they call it, blamed on relative to how many ways, how all these countries, for example, with nuclear bombs, and they say they fight on TV, and they show there's wars going on. People are getting killed right now in Afghanistan. And this could have been prevented because the only people who speak, for example, when they bring up the border at America or the border over there with Afghanistan, countries have needs to agree to things. But countries also simultaneously have needs to agree to explain, and they'll allow people to explain and understand how they are extorted bodies forced to be criminally foreign influenced and exploited that way as treatments of positive and negative, as treatments of the value of sequence true, even sequence before it. In other words, so the value of sequence true as semi-ancient nations. What really was in possession of their identity, and in other words, the same people forcing blame and readings of statutes, precedents, quality of time treatments, perception of others, actual, so since pounding drums between Native Americans A through Z, they were separated from their original means to maintain memory of revelations that had been known to be that what causes positive value nature progressions, action natures, reveals evolution's fruits and gifts and means from nowhere. They had means to preserve that were taken away, and that was sustained. Not one has trained. And that is still self-valued by the summary convictions of the sciences individually grouped in together because of how they are abridged, because of how identity works, because how identity is being exploited, because of how that keeps all what they call leaders as victims, but as a certain kind of victim predator, forced to blame it on other things, others themselves, because of locations, areas, and states. Originally still self-valued. All database relationships. So this is first at all identity of the ground locations. Then all identity of the database relationships, instances being recorded. Value progressions as our names, humanities, each age of them. This is where we're going to be ahead of time. This already was that. So that increasingly values that being and having been blamed on other things other than themselves. And that increasingly values roles keeping people hurting the same ones they hurt and help everyone while they're being knaves because of how people's treatments of the rules and of their respect for titles, where and how that originally instills differentially criminally foreign influenced. For example, so the overt criminal enterprises, plurals, ones that don't even know each other, just like people that don't even know each other with this, and the branches of the government differentially, constantly, increasingly, are kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts, finite, active, and progressive lies / illusions, and identity thefts and fraud styles, instances, roles, sequence shifts, roles. In other words, a whole bunch of natures of sequence shifts and uses of that. That gets over on everybody's perception. This already had to collusion, all treatments of positive and negative. In other words, it is relative to subjects that are relative to all other. For example, that and how our founding parents had to hide their roles with the Constitution, everyone had to pretend narratives other. Otherwise, the breaching method with all the different countries already involved with it, they would have had to been punished themselves. If they didn't punish, who would they be able to seek out and blame for that? So the people behind Marbury versus Madison, James Madison, and the Constitutional Convention, and the 13 original colonies. They're about overcoming what they didn't have. None of those people had means to defend, but they all already were organized by nature itself, wanting and needing to defend against what this is forcing everybody wanting and needing to be, which is, for example, collusion rolls with the exploitation of exceptions, and as exception, as nature's actually recorded. This is complete possession of the identity of volume, of each identity, ground, and difference, including the branches of government individually grouped together, including all the services tied to them as exception nature tied to them. And that together expands to private tied to them. Originally and still, with the overt criminal enterprises, plural, all that private, and its roles with the systems, intercampuses, campus marcius, ancient, then became corrupted, and semi-ancient times. It became simultaneously dysfunctional because the corruption was not just from a minority, a minute minority, relevant also to how and why, remotely, overtly, / insidiously. In other words, we have politicians up there saying white, in other words, they were trained to saying white, blaming whiteness. That's in collusion with mental health racketeering. That is also drugs and medicines racketeering, also with the branches of other two branches of government, the judicial branch and the executive, all privatized to them, like prisons. They're kept needing to hide life progressions at the streets and preemptively. They've been recording things out of sequence and saying things out of sequence, having the people say it. So they're saying more than one thing. And they continually, increasingly value how there's a constant surge of people going to courts, of people coming negatively and or insidiously as positive treatments with the police only, and that inclusion only, police forms. And so, for example, when they say defund the police, they don't make distinctions between the types of police. They don't make distinctions about all the, in other words, there are uses of differentially, tactically, criminally foreign influenced, identity of the ground, names, campuses, educations, in people's opinions on them. All the campuses are involved with identity theft fraud method. If anyone is going to speak about how everyone is positive properly, or about how everyone is negative properly, for example, when you say it's they're exploiting people that are, in other words, America's not free. There's a whole bunch of ways that America's not free, and if people don't understand that instantly, especially the people who know the most. See, these are people exploiting exceptions and exception nature, where and how business is allowed to do business anyway, even though the businesses and overt criminal enterprise is plural, and all these nations where they do peace, that's conjunction at locations here and there connected. That's because nature keeps that. But now it's through a filter, individually grouped and together, and uses of ground locations names too, again, as this. Countries A through Z in a trap, same ancient trap, all rap, box sayings. See, it is a minority within the semi-nature that already made and kept self-valued roles with and as the complete nature. You know, we have to set up the ground's identity of relationship to itself. The identity, itself being the identity of the sequence, the simultaneous nature. That inventions work or not in relationship to it. They are further positive or not in relationship to it. We don't have to agree on the name. In fact, we also have to agree to use God. We have to expand the definition of God and keep it the same. In other words, if you say thank God, it means that you actually honestly think that when you say that, it is positive to 5 identities of distinct but invisible but still discernible identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. They also bound 3 ways, each of them, which are these are 5 distinct identities of invisible but so still discernible. So, for example, is the identity of value progression that the letters are, and so in conjunction with the phrase, the articles a, and the is the definite article, finite, see finite, indefinite. So we have the articles, the word, the phrase, the clause, and the sentence. There's a diffusion here. So he would also start from the letter. But there's also that bond, 5. So then it becomes letter, article, word, phrase, clause. And that's why, for example, independent clause could be a sentence. This is also because the sciences share an identity. And so the ancients would be studying how, at the same simultaneously, with this hyperalgebra. The 0 and the 1. And the three distinct identities of 0, how they are bound and how they are only increasing as value, and where nature is value / value as nature, and where that is only becoming more positive here, or that temporary / lasting forever nature is forced from here, Earth's distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to the rest of space nature / existence nature, being our relationship to its identity of value / value progression, the identity of simultaneous nature. We're not supposed to agree about that. And where we are supposed to agree about that is, it's self-value, those exception nature having been employed, influenced, off records, because of, we'll examine methods. So for example, the Connecticut Department of Transportation, the Department of Motor Vehicles, they already had roles with people with the intelligence community that was already used, and collusion, for example, also with military police, at ground locations where they are pretending to film things and having people say things so they record things after they already said and communicated and recorded actually. So to hide these lie progressions, for example, then when other instances come up and came up and are ignored or not, they further exploit that as further wrongdoing and worse natures of predicate acts roles, which is also nature's abuses of children and of elderly and of elderly homes and of locations. This is a method of abuse /S recorded consciously since everyone was little from off all the identity ground campuses on off it consciously. And where the on-off part is, it maintains people roles with, replacing actually finite truths and facts with obfuscated ones. It has roles with uses of that are having been already coordinated on and off that campuses. So then that what is used remotely is what is standing that needs to pretend that it can't fathom that. And is doing that, and it is recorded. But this requires a quality of fact-keeping nature to counter what nations force themselves, like A through Z, gang members, where if one can't tell on each other, but every one of them knows that they're guilty because they were backed into, and has roles with collusion as worse gang members, which are the locations, areas, and states of countries A through Z. And where and how they're worse actually is differentially, constantly increasing. So we come to needs to discern an archetypal criminal enterprise relevant to our sequence treatments, relevant to sanctions treatments, for example. We have to amend with the processes where they agree to disagree and agree. They're also agreeing about things when they're agreeing to disagree. That we could fit in a means to change the nature of everything, and put like we're making a computer. They have to make all the different parts as sequence natures / simultaneous natures. They have to be first for themselves, and then everyone's going to work with the simultaneous nature, the value / value progression that the computer is, because the identities are. That's the cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall. They have two identities of sequence nature, like water in the air. We know. Also, relevant to what is positive or negative to itself. So nature tells a course that's other than what is told at all locations, areas, and states. And see, now what's doing that? That's why we have to understand how this was already made self-value, because how that is exploited. How they've been painting people. So we have to understand the distinct victims, not just of the overt criminal enterprise is separate from the branch of the government, and not just that separate, and with the military, all exception nature. Also, per their roles, needing to hide the same lies as people, killed, and as killers, and as people next to those body dumping spots. Involved also through time with coordinated corruption between Rod Hwy and Hangdog Lane, with on and off the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices and locations next to it, and all along Route 3 as people that have been seeding and saying fake things into records, then relevant to leading up intercities, predicate acts and databases, relevant where and how people that are involved with all these other countries, for example, countries that are fighting with each other now, Afghanistan, also rolls with Wethersfield, intercities, on-off, intercity from Wethersfield, interbranch, on-off, Central Connecticut State University, with people since I was in grammar school. I never had a conversation with, never saw on campus, never had anything to do with them on campus when I was in grammar school. who pretended other, apparently, or had other pretended for them, and or not, but relevant to, for example, their roles with Facebook, where these are people that have been speaking on a mass way, fake things into Facebook, because they're furthering all the fake things they were speaking since people were kids. Also, uses of the people next to the campuses, connected for them, are recorded. All people pretending to be against Social Security, Social Security racketeering, who are involved with racketeering with Social Security, and with all kinds of doctors taking that are of mental health and stuff like that. Real and also made up. They're databases. They're like, for example, if they force you 3 times, they forced me for mental evaluation. 2 times they totally made up, pretended I was yelling when I wasn't. Because 1 time I said I was going to yell until I got someone to get the police. Because you can't record the police. Then I had no communications with them. I let them see what they were going to do. And they've been forging names, switching names. These are also, Wethersfield police been doing this since before the World Trade Center attack. People with Hartford courts were involved with West Hartford and Britain, predicate acts at locations roles, whether they know or not, but to the extent they know. These high libel aggressions. This is also relevant to the confessed, recorded, and demonstrated by the people other tied to them. This is where they speak through others, but they're pretending it's just them, but it's everyone. And they brought it on, but not for the motivations. And say, I told them things out of sequence. In other words, so they've been in the background. They hear me say something, they're in the background, they're just going to put fake things in databases. So they've been forging names and switching names into branch. This is on a mass scale. This has remote uses of the sense and sensibilities of the constituencies of both political parties. Has complete remote possession over all our database relationship stewards, over where they live. There's complete remote possession over the uses of the corners for completely fact-cheating nature, identity theft roles. A whole bunch of people tied to uses of the corners and the policing, foreign and domestic, associated with the corners of streets. And one's near me. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Involved with, like, for example, predicate acts on Trinity College and CCSU, where they've been pretending things are recorded on campuses that never were. Because the campuses they're using the truth that the campuses are recorded 24/7 to pretend things in relationship between people that never were. Also relevant to the remote uses of all the ways that the programs and the departments individually grouped in together at Central Connecticut State University and at Trinity College and at UConn, who are involved with the names interstates, like former director of the F.B.I. and people from Washington, D.C., involved with also Connecticut interstate news organizations, pretending passions and emotions, and as pretending legitimacy to arrays of different sides and takes on each other that are in the collusion with the same sequence shifts, with the same people preventing mandated law, leading up to cases in them, a whole bunch of cases that had nothing to do with it. Like, and for example, leading up to in a 2006 district court case, there is an Eric Mendez, per other people, that's his name, and and he has a brother that they switch the names, and formally too. I believe it's a Janito Mendez through other people. He put me in fake quotations, fake communications with him. He's also one of the ones that forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded people from Saudi Arabia to rolls with them with predicate acts, identity thefts, and fraud. Since I was a kid on my campus, I never had a class with him. There are men and women involved with him, doctors, foreign and domestic, that have been attaching little kids to fake locations too, on little kids' campuses, as the ones that were intercities connected since I was a campus. And there's also a principal child abusers campus that had more then and now involved with this. They have the sense and sensibilities of the women leaders interbranch, sickly distinctly from the men, keeping time used all the way too fast, too slow to hide their life progressions, to hide them recorded with their worst patients and criminals, innocent people forced to blame on other things, others themselves, the real causes for negative actions, forced to leave quality fact-cheap nature that leave illusions, identity thefts and frauds that can't be defended enough us at the same time. I just remind, there are more then and now recorded intercities on and off the campuses of each age connected to the principal child offender and to people pretending passions and emotions regarding things I said online. This is also relevant to where and how you can't record the police and the courts. They recorded themselves. Sequence shifting, intercities, and as roles forcing abuses of the kids further. So they have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes regarding where and how they could lie to parents. They have a certain kind of victim that all the parents are individually grouped in together, that is employed that way so they could have victim predators, so they could refer to them as predators. For example, sequence shifting. For example, parting people from subjects, which everything is about the simultaneous. Yeah, she means a pair. Boxings. So, someone who believes me, they're using wire crime acts and methods and roles. They use the nature of the people that answer the phones, that are directed to speak to other police forms. And they've been directing them to replace what's actually recorded audio and video. And they've simultaneously been stacking multiple fake narratives too, to make people just get too dizzy and give up when they're trying to investigate things or try to investigate the legitimacy of things. What they call the, quote, intelligence community, unquote, recording quoting CNN reporters and recording, all the news stations, basic to America. And see, in the other countries, they're fake too. Sickly distinctly, it is self-valued too. And no one sees how sickly non-distinctly, because all that was used remotely by worse. There is a human fact-cheaping nature breaching method being and having been applied before countries A through Z were sophistication. Before locations, areas, and states were sophistication. While they were becoming sophistication, and while they are sophistication, they are the complete remote possession of that which has them denying that the validity and the only increasing value of and as that which is native pure. That identity of simultaneous nature. That identity of fact-cheaping nature, quality. That's what stops both sides from fighting. Because that's what's capable of making each place a unique place, increasingly by making it be the first place. And while simultaneously first, because that's what simultaneously about. In other words, when one part of your body is simultaneously to itself distinctly positive, it is positive of all parts of your identity. And that's where we are simultaneously a semi-nature to what is when we are positive to ourselves, our complete nature. We are simultaneously positive to it, which wants and needs more of itself, positive to itself, also here always, per its system, or it is forced from here, leaf of Hades. But see, this is a system tied to our fact treatment nature quality, tied to our sequence value treatments, that are the legitimacy, the value of that is offensively being and having been prevented our demonstration by people pretending passions and emotions. This again refers to where and how they paint. There's someone referred to me on one of YouTube or Facebook in a comment as immature. And see, these are one of the people involved with switching names, forging names, that have extended family members, their own kids. See, where and how there are remote uses of our fact treatment nature stewards. There are remote uses of where and how, when you speak about things that have to do with people like former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, and or his co-defendants like Thaddeus Grabowski, and right before 2006 case involved with the bench where out with the cars going in and out of the garage, and his roles with Eric Mendez. Eric Oliver is another name involved with identity thefts and frauds, distinctly from Eric Mendez. And this is Eric Mendez, and he's got a brother that's in Hartford now, outside of Fox Connecticut News, and it's right near a church, St. Anthony's Church. There's a Perone family, and there's a Kerr family. They're involved with judges and with the Department of Motor Vehicles and with police forms, and with their roles with offensive evidence reception racketeering, where they were acting things to have things recorded that are also in collusion. You know, this is also the best way to say is identity thefts and frauds too, but sequence shifts is more important because they are always constant. One of the things they have common with other people on and off Trinity College, on and off the Central Connecticut State roles with predicate acts before the World Trade Center attack, as roles in that context and after it, also on and off Hartford Hospital. And they have people associated with the Institute of Living on the campus of Hartford Hospital since its inception, being and having been involved with slavery, and with counters to it that were also in collusion with, and as uses of it, per that which was non-distinctly hurting everybody, while it was consciously making, effectively keeping everyone blaming other things, others themselves, and where and how they're defending the premises treatments, of the validity of their logic, everyone. The validity of their integrity when they say, quote, keeping it real, unquote. In other words, boxing's a field. Return. The time this campus calls you home. Forever fills it further. First, and wow, and more. Please learn. Boxing is all at once while turn and turn. Please learn. Boxing, it teaches things. 'Twill heal your souls. Let species coach begin the game. begin to gain. Behold. So we could fund this by not making negatives into positives, using negative and positive simultaneously, observed simultaneously, and outbound to make and reveal positive that is also positive unto itself, and here as means out of nowhere, as evolution's fruits and gifts. So how we could do this is a species book, in other words, and it will take conjunction with the state's books. And what we're gonna, all of this, the plan in it will take conjunction where and how we're gonna make unacceptable the identity of the grounds, identity of relationship to itself, everywhere. Because that's really, this is tactically denatured everywhere, sickly distinctly, effectively to keep, and having kept. How sickly non-distinctly, blamed on other things, others, and selves, through our own, here and there, individually grouped and together everywhere. And see that is forced. The one starts admitting, they start meeting a quality of fact cheap in nature. It doesn't match up with the quality of fact cheap in nature of our people speaking for ethics, of our people speaking for sequence validity, of our people speaking for, the validity of using as evidence courts we knew originally and still are as actually recorded criminally foreign influenced, hiding it by fabricating audio and video, speaking fake things into records through time, as rolls with a vertical and horizontal databases oriented method, also being and having been on and off other databases tied locations and on and off the ground locations, on and off other insidiously used locations, like body dumping spots, and like the spots next to it, and like people's homes, like through, for example, where the police react to being called. Those reactions were employed to keep them a certain type of victim that has to react to it as a fact cheap in nature. This is, for example, where and how everyone is differentially criminally foreign influenced. So we need to speak about the good and the bad simultaneously. And they're making us summarize it where we don't need to summarize it because it's in other words, it's about the invisible but still discernible. It's about, quality of truth treatments, fact treatments, fact treatment nature treatments. Now I'm using that phrase not just because, for example, we have to counter criminal insidiousness as a nature. We have to counter people speaking for the nature of the law with passions and emotions because they need to hide and need to increasingly self-value. Passion and emotions being and having been employed to roles within as the theater that at each age of fact cheap in nature speaking to correlation / discorrelation regarding questions regarding American history and regarding its presentation, which is differentially criminally foreign influenced. Which is sickly, distinctly criminally foreign influence, effectively to keep how sickly non-distinctly, not only not discerned and obfuscated, but that's self-value, and all that used remotely. So, We shouldn't have to speak long things like that. And then people also, why if you say it like that, we have people offensively with passions and emotions, making allegations against people who respond to fake things said about us online. For example, when they're in collusion with courts that have been sticking fake things into their databases, they've been arranging and self-valuing having been illusions, where and how they make a race of people pretend that they know others, and they make exceptions, in other words, to make it look, they use instances to lie about what came before that. And so they have to, this is, in other words, tied to the pretended needing to pretend passions and emotions at courts and as police forms, because that's how they were actually recorded also online. So this shows what is actually recorded, shows how we had courts like probate courts, and how we had superior courts and district courts, how we had them criminally foreign influenced, and how that was self-valued. For example, their roles with all kind of things, with the people going into prisons that were first involved with the roles with the child abuses of them, identity thefts and frauds relevant, uses of rights to lie to parents. You know, in other words, where they don't have, and leaving out exceptions, leaving a trail of, you know, stewards of sciences, increasingly self-valuing them knave from intercities, colleges and universities, hardly taught at the regular public schools levels. We must understand this is a trap against every single person, sickly, distinctly. We must understand the only way we can overcome it is how and why. They did that just to keep how sickly, non-distinctly, not only not discerned, but self-valued by everyone through other motivations, nature's needs, interest, to have it not discerned. And it's an identity of relativity and that is inseparable from the subject/s, relative to anyone of integrity who wants to speak for American history, anyone who wants to speak for health. See, but they need to pretend other by pretending passions by an oath, are private stewards, wherein how they are exception nature, extensions of and as the government, and their roles with that too. We have all kinds of offensive evidence reception, worse than war crimes, simple offensive evidence reception racketeering methods. You see, well, everything's recorded now. They're recording things out of sequence, and they already did this so long they've been faking it. So I don't know this Daryl Chandler, and I never met his sister. And there are people with the intelligence community tied to it, like Foodback. Nothing against Foodback in Wethersfield on South State Highway. And with Taekwondo places associated with this guy. There are some people who are involved with the Taekwondo places. And with nothing against the countries, like I think that's Korean countries. Nothing against them. It's a whole bunch of people associated with these ones. Like also Afghanistan, nothing against Afghanistan. They have the individual grouped in together, the members of these countries involved with predicate acts, coordinated roles, coordinated for them. The people, the names I have to use. But these are also people forging and switching names, leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since. Leading up to in other words, from Connecticut, intercities haven't been coordinating stuff, also interstates. So, They need to pretend things out of sequence and passions and motives. They need to quantify things. They're pretending it means something. A whole bunch of people in the background pretending passions and emotions. I'm trying to speak about how everyone's good and being exploited. Because that's my one of the things. And I want to teach too. These are people. They're offensively maintaining criminally foreign influenced uses of each age of fact should be nature's kids. Self-value. Now these are people that need to lie about other people's emotions and passions and other people's motivations. Increasingly, they need to lie about their own. So they need to, and it's in context where everyone's perception is through others. And that was and is being and has been exploited. Specifically to keep anyone who tries to speak about how everyone's a victim, blaming other things other than themselves. And people individually grouped and together will attack them and say that they're attacking others. When others use the logic they're using that is recorded involved with offensives against people trying to defend the integrity and the value of sequence truth and of individuals' needs to call out the BS. We have to get better names for things. To call it the criminal insidiousness. I was to say the insidiousness. Because this is levels of it. They don't even understand from the top down, but they used remotely. They understand where that's not true. They understand they need to hide life aggressions. They increasingly self-value means to get away with doing that, having been put there through criminal foreign influence, tactical criminal foreign influence. Method, singular, designed to keep methods of roles and simultaneously pretending other, as all identity ground locations, uses of them, as by our fact sheet nature, as all individuals grouped and together, uses of everyone's names, titles, positive and negative treatments simultaneously as identity treatments, criminally foreign influenced. So you're preventing the short words and their revelations regarding all the bad things. Because if you put those bad things in the good things, you go bad, this is bad and this is good. This is they're always they're attributing roles. Souls. Forgiveness doesn't mean give up. It means explain how everyone was being used remotely as victim predators and screening it, including the identity of the ground locations. Each. See breach. You presume we could make the negative that modern nations have nuclear weapons, and we can make the negative how countries want to get nuclear weapons, and we could simultaneously put the monies there while sanctions or whatever like that, whatever they're doing now, making no opinion about that. We just, until they agree and want to agree, and then still we try to make it more. In other words, if there's a mountain there, now they're no longer going to be doing negative value needs progression, like trying to make things that blow up Earth. Nature doesn't like it, including here. So then we make the nations agree with us. We'll make it a game. What would make them afford? In other words, we make their mountains make up free fresh water streams. The whole world's going to help give them the perfect whole bunch of fish. The way, in other words, it's going to be designed so there's ones that live in the bottom, ones that live in the thing, and they all have sources of food. We're going to put identity, the grounds, identity, the relationship to itself, that is capable of following what causes positive value nature, progressions, action nature, actually properly. Now, okay, we're going to do this industry, we're going to go like this. Now you're just investing in employing people to motivations, needs, theater. Okay, well, this is a theater just for a company. You know, people have jobs. More and more nature's needs, interests for abridged qualities of fact, achievement nature, and motivations towards people who want to use simple, short words. There are people constantly, increasingly forsaken at all locations, especially those most forsaken, specifically to keep us from using such easy to discern, already engineered for us, means to the observation of people pretending to be about America and our founding parents and economy righteously, but who are not, and how that is used remotely, because they're all victims, all victim predators. We have to see the names, the sequence shifts. So in other words, this what is actually recorded shows methods that shows offensive evidence perception racketeering. For example, people speaking things recorded and then using that in courts with juries after people already said, therefore communicated other. See, this is a hyper communication hostage method. There is verbal communication, nonverbal communication, and there is hypocommunication, where communication also involves criminal and serious, criminally foreign influence uses of premises treatments, of collusion with such, designed to keep originally and still collusion with and as all locations, areas, and states formal fact-shaping nature, blaming other things, others, and selves for the real causes of negative value nature, progressions, action natures, and then defending that. And those defenses, again, used remotely. Who disbelieves? They must pick one name in sequence, please. This is inter countries, A through Z. So they're only representatives and are only representatives that fight with each other. They'll blame the side that's that catches their side. In other words. Thank you.